Now we're going to discuss inverse sine, and much of what we say regarding inverse sine will be the same as what we said regarding inverse cosine. Like with the cosine function, we have to restrict our view of the sine function to a portion of the graph that passes the horizontal line test in order to discuss its inverse. So if I look at the graph of sine, notice I can't use 0 to 180. If I use 0 to 180, I actually have a hump, and a hump won't pass the horizontal line test. So instead, what I choose to use is the part from negative 90 to 90. That'll do two things. It'll pass the horizontal line test, and the second thing it will do is it'll give me all of the possible values of sine, everything from -1 to 1. So again, like we said before, for a restricted region, the input or domain of sine x is an angle. So when I'm dealing with sine x, not the inverse, and it'll be an angle between -90 and 90, including both the -90 and the 90. And the output will end up being a value in the interval from -1 to 1. When we look at the inverse sine and graph it, notice what we see. Again, remember we interchange the domain and range? And so notice what was y's on the sine graph become the x's on the inverse sine. So notice the inverse sine goes from -1 to 1. And again, if I had actually put a scale on this, you would have noticed that the y's would go from -90 up to 90. And so this is the graph of the inverse sine function. So inverse sine, remember, is also sometimes called arc sine. And again, I actually like that notation even though your book doesn't use it. And we could say in either the inverse notation with the superscript -1, which again, remember, does not mean 1 over, or we could use this arc sine y. And notice when we use arc sine y, when we use kind of the abbreviation, we don't use the e on that particular part. Just like when we do sine of y or sine of x, we don't put the e on. So the input or domain of inverse sine is actually a value between -1 and 1. So remember, it's backwards from the regular sine function. So the input is the value between -1 and 1, and the output of inverse sine is an angle, and it will always be an angle between -90 and 90. Once again, inverse sine is also called arc sine. And the last statement we would say is, well, if y equals sine of t, then again our inverse notation would say t is the inverse sine of y, provided that t is between -90 and 90, and also remember that y would be between -1 and 1.